Well, for those of us born here, you know, you're infected with two things from birth: politics and the Red Sox. And there's no question that this is a spawning ground for a lot of good people in politics. On the other hand, Mitt Romney was not born here, but he came here. I guess he must have been infected as well. But there is something about this state and its political culture that really is different. And I think has a real impact on those of us who either are born here and grow up here or come here as students and stay. And that is that getting deeply and actively involved in the politics of our communities and state and country is something that we do, that's important. And I think that's the major reason why we seem to be the, as I say, the spawning ground for a lot of folks who end up running for the presidency. Well, I can't explain to you why I was a candidate for the presidency of the third grade class at the Baker School in Brookline, Massachusetts in 1942 or whenever it was. But I was. So there was something in my DNA that produced that. But I think the fact, part of it was ethnic. I mean, Greeks tend to be political in the sense that, I mean, I remember family gatherings. Olympia, my cousin, the famous actress, and her family would get together on holidays and this kind of thing. Got together on weekends all the time. And there was always a lively discussion about politics, more often about Greek politics than American politics, but it was there. Every night at 6 o'clock, the CBS, this is in the pre-TV era, the CBS News World Roundup was on radio. We all had to sit and listen to all these correspondents crackling in from all over the world. But Boston also then was not the Boston of today. It was a tough, declining, racist, anti-Semitic city, frankly. People of color didn't live on this side of the railroad tracks. That was it. I think we maybe had 4 black kids at Brookline High School and 5 Asian American kids. And with one exception, the daughter of Roland Hayes, the great, great African American tenor, the black kids were the kids of janitors. They lived in the basement. And the mostly Chinese American kids lived in the back of what we used to call Chinese laundries. That was it. That was diversity in the town of Brookline, which, by the way, was 5-to-1 Republican when I was a kid. I think this enormous gap between our expressed values as Americans, or as, for that matter, as people of this very historic state, and what was really going on bothered the hell out of me. And in any event, for whatever reason, and fortunately for me, Brookline began moving at least into the independent column. And then we have this thing called the representative town meeting in many large towns. So as a law student, when I got back from Korea, I decided to run for town meeting. Now, if I had lived in Boston, and in those days, the city council was elected citywide, I probably wouldn't have had a shot. But here I was in one precinct in the town of Brookline, so I spent $10, printed up some cards with my picture on it and a few qualifications, and went out and rang every doorbell in the precinct, stood in front of the polling place for 13 hours and got elected. I mean, all of these are, you know, in a sense, it's kind of lucky, but they're all pieces of what made it possible for me to get involved in politics in the first place. I don't want to say he was a political family, because his dad began as a business guy, but he was the son of a governor. And by the way, a darn good one. And so in that sense, he had been brought up in a political family. My family wasn't, you know, they weren't political activists, my parents, but they were interested. They were naturalized citizens. They both had come over as immigrants. They always voted. And they made sure that their sons were engaged and interested in listening to this kind of stuff. And that had a powerful influence on us. But I think Massachusetts does have a much livelier political culture, if you want to use the term. I think any time a Massachusetts person runs for the presidency, It's a big factor around here. Now, I had the added pleasure, if you will, and satisfaction of seeing my ethnic community say, hey, our guy's running for the presidency. Not unlike what happened in the African American community with Barack Obama, and for the same reason. When I first ran for the legislature in 1960, it was inconceivable that a Greek American could be elected governor. Not because people didn't like us, we just weren't that big, and in any event, there was no room for us in the ethnic politics of the time, at least at that level. Just to show you how things have evolved, 20 years later, there was a Greek in the governor's office, that was me. There was a Greek United States Senator, that was Paul Tsongas. There was a Greek Congressman, Nick Mavroulis, the former mayor of Peabody. All of us sons of immigrants. And an Armenian-American Speaker of the House, George Kavarian, even more inconceivable. And these days, needless to say, we have an African-American governor. You know, it's just a whole different ballgame. But the fact that there were these limits bothered the hell out of me. And it just seemed to me that this was un-American. What do you mean? This is the land of opportunity. I'd be the land of opportunity for people in politics too, right? No barriers. Thanks to the president, I think we've breached the last one, at least I hope we have. And more power to the governor. Here's a guy who was born in Chicago. Came here as a teenager, to be sure. But it's one of the great strengths of this state. Well, there are all kinds of reasons. I mean, I don't think it's got anything to do with where we come from. I mean, Jack Kennedy was president of the United States, right? Tip O'Neill was the speaker. John McCormick was the speaker. I mean, we've had a powerful influence, and our congressional delegation is still as good as any in the country. And a number of us as governors have had considerable influence nationally. I think every campaign is different. I mean, I just made a big mistake. I made a mistake. I made a decision. It was my decision, nobody else's, that I was not going to respond in any way to the Bush attack campaign. Turned out that was the biggest mistake I ever made. You just can't do that. John Kerry, I mean, this genuine war hero, almost got killed in Vietnam, running against a guy who was reading magazines in some Air National Guard unit in Alabama. And this swift boat thing hits him. Same problem I had. Didn't respond immediately. You know, Romney's got all kinds of other problems, which I won't get into. But Paul Tsongas, a good candidate, a good guy, kind of ran out of money, just couldn't sustain it. Look, running for the presidency is the toughest thing you'll ever have to do in politics. And it's distressing that since Kennedy, we haven't been able to get a Massachusetts guy elected. But we've come close. And I hope and expect that good people from Massachusetts will continue to seek that office. I don't think it was Massachusetts. I think it was this serious mistake that I made, and it would have been a problem whatever my state. Mm-hmm. But I think Massachusetts and New England are held in rather high regard by people. After all, a lot of them want to send their kids here to go to school. And so I think we're, well, not only well regarded, but I think from an economic standpoint, I mean, look at us today. Now, we were not doing well under Romney. Had a lousy economic record, but look at what we've been able to do under Deval Patrick. I mean, we're in this, we were 47th out of 50 under Romney. We're now in the top 10. And walk around this city, I can't believe it myself. I mean, there are cranes everywhere. So I think we have lots of strengths which people recognize elsewhere. And of course, one of our greatest strengths is that we have these incredible 120 colleges and universities, which not only attract people, but in many cases, about half of them, they want to stay here. That's a huge resource for us, a huge resource.
Romney seems now to tout the fact that Massachusetts students are ranked #1. That was certainly present in your administration as well. We've historically always been high-ranking students.
I think I'm not sure the National Education Assessment was being done at the time when I was there. I don't remember it. But the fact of the matter is that we are number one, have been for the last 5 years. Now, in point of fact, we should be. I mean, given who we are, these colleges and universities, very high percentage of college graduates in the adult population, much higher than in other places. Always have had high rates of literacy. I mean, you go back to the 19th century, and the South was maybe 20% literate, and we were 95% literate. So there's always been that, this is where the first public school system was founded, and so on and so forth. So that's been part of our DNA. But these days, when, you know, the most important economic currency is knowledge, when you have these kinds of educational resources, you've got a lot, and we got them. On the whole, very well. I mean, there was some country singer who was with Bush who was joking about my name and stuff, but that was very unusual. And remember, as this country becomes more and more diverse, a candidate for the presidency who himself is the child of immigrants can connect with those folks. I mean, I had extraordinary support, not only in the African American community, but in the Latino community. Why? Well, I speak pretty good Spanish. Why? Because the Greek and Spanish accents are identical, even though the languages are different. If you speak Greek, you speak perfectly accented Spanish and vice versa. That's a huge plus. I'd spent time in Korea. I speak some Korean, not as much as I did when I was there. That made a difference. The Asian Indian community was really involved in a presidential campaign for the first time. And I think a lot of this was, hey, he comes out of an immigrant background, we come out of an immigrant background. I'll never forget being in McAllen, Texas. 1,500 people waiting for me under this shed in May, hot day. And these folks, having come out of the fields with their kids, to have them meet and shake the hand of this guy who, like them, were the children, was a child of immigrants. I'll never forget it. It was one of the most emotional moments of the entire campaign. And the fact that I could speak reasonably conversationally with them made a huge difference. But it was never an obstacle to me, and as I say, I think it was a net plus.